The warning lights filled the bridge of the wandering star with red flashes. Captain stared at the screen in front of him, his fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair. The distress signal was weak, but it was definitely there. Someone needed help. "Captain, this doesn't make sense," said from her station. The young engineer pulled up a map on the main display. "That signal is coming from the forbidden sector. Nobody goes there, ever." Nodded slowly. He had heard the stories. Every in the galaxy knew about that cursed place. The sector had been locked down for thousands of years. Ancient warnings surrounded it like a fence made of fear itself. "What do the warnings say?" he asked. Typed quickly on her console. Text appeared on the screen in dozens of different alien languages. She translated the most common ones. "Death lives here. Turn back or be consumed. The beast that ends all things waits within. Do not enter on pain of extinction." She looked at her captain. "There are 47 different warnings, sir. All of them say basically the same thing." The ship's medic walked onto the bridge carrying a cup of hot tea. He was older than the rest of the crew, with gray starting to show in his hair. "Please tell me we're not going in there," he said, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. "Someone is in trouble," said simply. Their pilot spun her chair around to face the captain. She was the youngest of the crew, barely 25, but she could fly the wandering star through an asteroid field blindfolded. "Captain, the Galactic Council has made it clear. That sector is off limits. If we go in there, we could lose our license. We could lose everything." Stood up from his chair and walked to the main. Outside, space looked peaceful. Stars twinkled in the darkness like tiny diamonds. But he knew that out there, somewhere in that forbidden zone, someone was sending a distress call. Someone was scared and alone and hopping for rescue. "The signal is automated," said, pulling up more data. "It's old technology, really old, like 10,000 years old." "Could it be a trap?" asked. "Maybe," admitted, "but it could also be someone who actually needs help." He turned to face his crew. "I'm not ordering any of you to come with me. This is my choice. If you want to stay here while I take a shuttle in, I'll understand." The three crew members looked at each other. Was the first to speak. "You're a terrible pilot, Captain. You'd crash into the first piece of space debris you encountered. I'm coming." "Someone will need to analyze whatever we find," added. "I'm in." Sighed deeply and set down his tea. "Well, I suppose you'll need a medic when this goes horribly wrong. Count me in." Felt a warmth in his chest. This was why he loved his crew. "All right then, set course for the forbidden sector, but take it slow. If anything looks dangerous, we pull back immediately." As hands danced across the controls, the ship began to move forward. They crossed into the restricted zone within the hour. Immediately, alarms started blaring from multiple communication channels. "We're being hailed," said. "Multiple ships, looks like Galactic Council observers." "Put them through," ordered. The face of an alien appeared on screen. Its compound eyes reflected the bridge lights in 100 different directions. The translator rendered its clicking speech into human language. "Human vessel, you are in violation of galactic law. Turn back immediately." "We received a distress signal," explained. "Someone needs help." "There is no one in that sector, only death." "What's the?" asked. The alien's mandibles clicked together in what might have been distress. "The is the reason the sector is forbidden. It is an ancient beast, a creature of nightmare from a dead civilization. It cannot be killed. It cannot be reasoned with. It only consumes. The old empire tried to destroy it and failed. They locked it away instead, and we have kept it locked away ever since." "If it's locked away, then it can't hurt anyone," said. "And if the distress signal is coming from there, maybe the containment is failing." "Then let it fail far from inhabited worlds," the alien replied. "Human, your species is known throughout the galaxy for your foolish compassion. You try to save everything, even things that should not be saved. Do not do this." "I appreciate the warning," said politely, "but we're going to investigate." The alien seemed to slump in defeat. "Then you go to your deaths. The Galactic Council will not send rescue for you. You have been warned." The transmission cut off. "Well, that was cheerful," muttered. Guided the ship deeper into the sector. The distress signal grew stronger. Soon they saw it on their sensors, a massive structure floating in space. It was ancient, covered in strange markings that none of their databases could translate. The structure was roughly spherical, easily 5 kilometers across, and it pulsed with a faint, dying energy. "That's some kind of containment facility," said, studying her readings. "The energy field is failing. Whatever is inside, it won't be contained for much longer." "Can you scan inside?" asked. Tried but shook her head. "The walls are too thick, but I'm reading something massive in the center, something alive. And the life signs are weird. I've never seen anything like this." "The distress signal is coming from an automated system," added. "I think the facility itself is calling for help." Made his decision. "Bring us in closer. I want a full scan of that structure. If it's failing, we need to know what we're dealing with." As they approached, the structure grew larger and larger on there. It was covered in scars from weapons fire, ancient and new. Someone had tried many times to destroy this place. All had failed. "Captain," said quietly, "what if the other species are right? What if this thing inside really is a monster?" Looked at the ancient prison floating before them. "Then we'll deal with that when we need to. But right now, something is in trouble, and we didn't come all the way out here just to turn around." The wandering star moved closer to the structure, and somewhere deep inside that ancient cage, something massive stirred in the darkness. The interior of the ancient structure was dark and cold, and wore environment suits as they floated through the corridors. Their helmet lights cut through the blackness, revealing walls covered in strange symbols and warning signs. Had stayed behind on the wandering star, keeping the ship ready in case they needed a quick escape. Her voice crackled through their helmet radios. "Readings show the central chamber is 300 meters ahead. Whatever is in there, it's big, really big." "How big?" asked as he pulled himself along a wall using the handholds. "Bigger than our ship," replied. "Maybe bigger than 3 of our ships." Swept her scanner across a control panel built into the wall. "These systems are ancient. Whoever built this place had technology far beyond what we have now, but it's all failing. The power cores are almost dead." "How long before total failure?" asked. "Days maybe, possibly hours. The containment field is collapsing." They continued forward in silence. The corridor opened into a larger space, and suddenly they could see it. The central chamber was enormous, a sphere carved out of the heart of the structure, and floating in the middle, held in place by shimmering fields of energy, was the had seen many strange creatures in his years exploring space. He had seen the gas beings of Prime, the silicon-based life forms of Granite 7, even the living nebulas near the galactic core. But nothing had prepared him for this. It was massive and terrible and somehow magnificent all at once. Its body was covered in scales that seemed to absorb light itself, making it look like a piece of the void had been given form. Hundreds of eyes dotted its surface, each one glowing with a faint, hungry light. Great claws, each as long as a person, were curled against its body. Its mouth was filled with teeth like swords. "By all the stars," whispered. The energy fields holding the creature were flickering. In some places they had already failed completely. There was pressed against the remaining fields and could see that the creature was wounded. Deep gashes ran along its sides, weeping a dark fluid that floated in the zero gravity. Parts of its scales had been torn away, revealing flesh beneath. "It's hurt," said her voice full of surprise. "The containment field is crushing it. Look there." She pointed to where the field pressed against the creature's body, cutting into its flesh. "It's also starving," added, studying his medical scanner. "Life signs are weak. This thing hasn't had proper nutrition in, I don't even know how long, centuries, maybe longer. As they watched, one of the hundreds of eyes turned toward them, felt his breath catch. The eye was huge, easily the size of his helmet, and it looked at him with an intelligence that was impossible to deny. This was not a mindless beast. Something aware looked back at him. The creature's mouth opened and a sound came out. It was not quite a roar and not quite a cry. It resonated through the structure, making the walls vibrate. Every one of the eyes was now focused on the three humans. "We should go," said nervously. "We should go right now." But couldn't move. He stared at the creature and saw something he hadn't expected. Pain, fear. There was suffering and it knew it was dying. He said slowly, "Can we stabilize the containment field?" The engineer was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. But Captain, if we stabilize it, we're trapping that thing here. If we do nothing, the field fails and the creature goes free." "If the field fails completely, what happens?" asked. Ran calculations on her device. "The collapse will create an energy discharge. Big one. It'll probably destroy this entire structure and anything nearby, including us." "And the creature?" "Hard to say. It might survive. It might not. But if it does survive and it's as dangerous as everyone says, it'll be free to go wherever it wants." Made a decision that he knew would change everything. "We stabilize the field, and then we help it." "Help it?" His voice went up an octave. "Captain, that thing is the reason this entire sector has been forbidden for 10,000 years. The warnings said it consumed 3 colonies." "The warnings also said it belonged to an ancient empire," replied. "Empires don't usually have wild animals as pets. Something doesn't add up." He activated his radio. "I need you to prepare the medical supplies, everything we have, and contact anyone you can find who knows about ancient civilizations. I need information about the Empress Throne people." "Captain, what are you planning?" asked. "We're going to save it." There was a long pause. Then's voice came back steady and calm. "Understood, Captain. Preparing medical supplies now." Over the next hour, they worked carefully. Accessed the ancient control systems, her fingers moving across interfaces that hadn't been touched in. She managed to redirect power from dying systems to strengthen the containment field. The pressure on the eased slightly. The creature watched them work. Its hundreds of eyes followed their every movement. When the field shifted, releasing some of the pressure on its wounds, it made that sound again. This time, thought it sounded less like pain and more like surprise. Had returned to the ship to prepare medical equipment. When he came back, he was carrying enough supplies to stock a small hospital. "I still think this is insane," he said as he unpacked containers of medicine and scanning equipment. "But if we're doing this, we're doing it right." "How do we even treat something like that?" asked, staring at the massive creature. "Very carefully," replied. He activated a medical drone, a small flying device equipped with scanners and medication dispensers. "I'm going to send this in for a closer look. If it doesn't eat the drone, we might have a chance." The drone flew toward navigating between the energy fields. The creature's eyes tracked it, and for a moment was certain it would snap the drone out of the air with its massive jaws. But the remained still, allowing the drone to approach. "Getting readings now," said, watching his scanner. This is strange. The biological structure is unlike anything in our databases, but some of the patterns are similar to domesticated species. This thing was bred, not evolved naturally." "You mean someone created it?" asked. "Not created. Selectively bred over many generations, like humans did with dogs thousands of years ago. This was someone's guardian animal." Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold station. Then what happened to its masters? "They died," a new voice said through their radios. Captain, I found some information. The Empress Throne civilization collapsed 10,000 years ago. A plague killed them all within a single generation. According to the records, they left behind automated systems to care for their guardian creatures, but those systems were never meant to last forever. Looked at with new understanding. It's been here for 10,000 years, alone, starving, waiting for masters who are never coming back. The creature's eyes seemed to focus on him more intently, as if it could understand his words. Perhaps it could. Perhaps it had been waiting all this time for someone, anyone, to remember that it had once been more than just a monster in a cage. Said quietly, "Can we help it?" The medic studied his readings for a long moment. "Maybe," he finally said, "but it's going to take time, resources, and more luck than we probably have. And Captain, there's no guarantee it won't turn on us the moment it has the strength." "I know," replied, "but we have to try." In the darkness of that ancient prison, watched the small creatures who had come to its cage. And for the first time in 10,000 years, something that might have been hope flickered in its hundreds of eyes. The work was slow and dangerous. Every movement had to be calculated. Every approach had to be careful. One wrong move could trigger the into attack, or worse, cause the failing containment field to collapse completely. Stood at the entrance to the central chamber, watching as guided another medical drone toward the massive creature. This was the 5th drone they had sent in. The first 3 had been destroyed when the lashed out in fear and pain. The 4th had managed to deliver some antibiotics to the worst of the creature's wounds before being crushed by a reflexive swipe of its claws. But this 5th drone was different. Watched it approach, and this time it didn't attack. It remained still, its hundreds of eyes tracking the small flying device with what might have been curiosity. "It's learning," said from her position at the control panel. "It's starting to understand we're trying to help." "Or it's getting too weak to fight back," cautioned. But his voice held hope despite his words. The drone extended a long needle and injected pain medication into one of the wounds. The creature flinched but didn't strike. A low rumble came from deep within its body, vibrating through the entire structure. "Is that a good sound or a bad sound?" asked from the ship. She had been shuttling back and forth, bringing supplies and taking data back to analyze. "I don't know," admitted, "but it's not eating the drone, so I'm calling it progress." Hours passed, then days. The crew worked in shifts, never leaving the alone for long. They strengthened the containment field to stop it from crushing the creature, but they also began mapping the field structure, looking for ways to eventually lower it safely. Found himself spending more and more time in the chamber, just watching He talked to it sometimes, his voice soft through his helmet speaker. He didn't know if it could understand him, but talking seemed to calm the creature. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" he said during one of these quiet moments, "waiting for someone to come back, someone who loved you." One of the massive eyes focused on him, felt his heart beat faster. There was intelligence in that gaze, real, deep intelligence. This was not an animal. This was a person of a different sort, trapped and suffering for thousands of years. "We're going to get you out of here," he promised. "I don't know how yet, but we will." The creature made a sound, softer than before, almost gentle. On the 3rd day, made a breakthrough. "I've been analyzing this biology," he said, gathering the crew in the ship's common area. "I think I know why it was so aggressive when it was first captured." "Tell us," said. "It's the diet. The automated feeding systems were giving it generic nutrients, but that's not what it needs. Is a specialized feeder. In the wild, or rather in its natural role, it would have eaten a very specific type of organism. Without that, it's been slowly starving for thousands of years. The hunger drove it mad." "Can we synthesize what it needs?" asked. "Maybe. If I can break down the chemical compounds it requires, our food processors might be able to create something close. It won't be perfect, but it should be better than what it's been getting." They worked through the night, ran test after test, mixing different compounds, checking them against this biological needs. Finally, he created a thick, dark paste that their scanners said should be adequate. "This is either going to help," said, loading the paste into a drone, "or it's going to make things worse. Either way, we'll know soon." The drone carried the food to the creature sniffed at it, its massive nostrils flaring. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, carefully, the extended a long tongue and tasted the paste. The reaction was immediate. The creature devoured the food in seconds, and then turned its hundreds of eyes toward the watching humans. The look was unmistakable. More. "I think it likes it," said with a small laugh. They fed the again and again over the next several days. With each meal, the creature grew stronger. Its wounds began to heal. The dark fluid that had been leaking from its injuries stopped flowing. New scales started to grow over the damaged areas. But more than the physical changes, something else was happening. It was becoming calmer, less aggressive. The wild, desperate look in its eyes was fading, replaced by something else: awareness, reason. On the seventh day, made the decision he had been considering since they first arrived. "I'm going in there," he announced. "Without the drone, I'm going to approach it directly." "Absolutely not," said immediately. "Captain, we don't know if it's safe." "We'll never know unless someone tries," replied. "And it has to be me. I'm the captain. I won't ask anyone else to take this risk." Stood up from her seat. "Then I'm going with you. You'll need someone to monitor the containment field while you're in there." Started to object. "No arguments, Captain. You said you wouldn't order us to take risks. You didn't say we couldn't volunteer." Smiled despite his worry. "All right, but we do this carefully. At the first sign of danger, we retreat, understood?" They suited up and made their way to the central chamber. There was resting when they arrived, its massive body floating in the reduced gravity of the containment field. As they entered, every one of its eyes opened and focused on them. Took a deep breath and pushed off from the wall, floating slowly toward the creature. He moved with careful, deliberate motions, keeping his hands visible and his body language as non-threatening as possible. They watched him come closer. Its claws flexed, but it didn't strike. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing those sword-like teeth, but it didn't roar. "Hello," said softly. "My name is, we've been trying to help you. Do you understand me?" He was now less than 10 meters from the creature, close enough to see the texture of its scales, the slight movements as it breathed, the intelligence burning in its many eyes. They made a sound. It was different from the roars and cries they had heard before. This sound was almost gentle, almost like it was trying to communicate. Reached out slowly, extending his hand toward the creature. "It's okay," he said. "We're not going to hurt you. We want to help." This massive head moved forward. One of its eyes, easily twice the size of its entire body, studied him closely. Then, incredibly, the creature pressed the side of its head against its outstretched hand. The touch was gentle, careful. They could have crushed him with the slightest pressure, but it controlled its strength with perfect precision. It held still, accepting the touch like a dog might accept a pat from its master. "Oh my stars," whispered from behind him. It's tame, it was always tame." Felt tears in his eyes. This creature, this magnificent being, had spent 10,000 years in pain and isolation. 10,000 years waiting for a kind touch that never came. Until now. "You're a good beast, aren't you?" he said softly, gently moving his hand across the creature's scales. "You were just doing your job, guarding, protecting. And when your family died, you kept waiting for them. You never gave up." They made that gentle sound again and could swear it sounded like relief, like gratitude, like hope. From the ship's voice crackled through the radio. "Captain, we're being hailed. Multiple ships. The Galactic Council observers want to know what we're doing." "Tell them," said, not taking his hand away from that we're making a new friend." Behind him was already working on the control panel, preparing for the next phase of their plan. They had saved them from immediate death. Now came the hard part, finding it a home where it could finally rest after 10,000 years of suffering. The creature looked at with its hundreds of eyes, and in that moment they both understood. This was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning. The messages from the Galactic Council started coming in every hour. Each one was more urgent than the last. The aliens wanted to know what the humans were doing with the... They wanted answers. They wanted the humans to leave immediately. They wanted many things, none of which was ready to give them. He sat in the captain's chair of the Wandering Star, reading the latest message. This one was from Ambassador, the alien who had warned them away in the beginning. Captain, the translated message read, "You must understand the danger you are in. He is not a creature that can be helped. It is a weapon. It was created by the Empress Throne civilization to protect their colony worlds, and it did so by consuming anything they deemed a threat. When the Empress Throne fell, they went mad. It destroyed 3 entire colony worlds before it was captured and imprisoned. Thousands of lives were lost. You are playing with death itself." Closed the message and opened his communication channel. "Ambassador, this is Captain. I've read your concerns and I understand them. But I need to share something with you. We've been studying the old records, and I think there's more to this story than anyone knows." He paused, gathering his thoughts. It didn't go mad because it was naturally violent. It went mad because it was starving and in pain. It was a guardian animal bred to be loyal and protective. When its masters died, the automated systems that were supposed to care for it failed. It was given the wrong food, left in isolation, and slowly driven insane by suffering. What you've all been afraid of wasn't a monster. It was a broken, desperate creature that needed help. There was a long silence. Then's voice came through, translated into human language. "You expect us to believe that the beast that killed thousands was simply hungry." "I expect you to look at the evidence," replied. "We've been feeding the properly for the past week. We've treated its wounds. And do you know what happened? It became calm, gentle even. This creature is intelligent, Ambassador. It can be reasoned with. It can be helped." Another voice joined the conversation. This one belonged to a different alien species, one that spoke in musical tones. "Human Captain, even if what you say is true, what do you propose to do with the... It is too large to be kept on a ship, too dangerous to be released near populated worlds. Where would such a creature go?" That was the question had been wrestling with for days, had been searching for possible solutions, scanning databases for suitable locations. Now she spoke up from her station. "We've found a place," she said. "It's called Sanctuary 7. It's an uninhabited world in the outer reaches. The planet has a stable ecosystem, plenty of wildlife that matches the dietary needs, and it's far enough from populated space that there's no risk to colonies. It was set aside centuries ago as a refuge for endangered species." "A sanctuary," said thoughtfully. "You wish to relocate to a sanctuary world?" "Yes," confirmed. "We can't keep it in this prison. That would just be more cruelty. But we can give it a place where it can live freely without threatening anyone." The musical-voiced alien spoke again. "This would require Galactic Council approval. Moving a Class 10 hazard creature across multiple sectors is no small matter." "Then we're asking for that approval," said firmly. "This creature has suffered for 10,000 years. It deserves a chance at peace." The conversation continued for hours. The Galactic Council representatives argued and debated. Some were sympathetic, others were fearful, but slowly could feel opinions shifting. The evidence was too strong to ignore. This transformation from violent to calm, from hostile to gentle, told a story that was hard to deny. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ambassador spoke. "The Council will allow this, but with conditions. They must be monitored during transport. If it shows any signs of aggression, the operation will be terminated. And the humans who insist on helping this creature must accept full responsibility for any consequences." "We accept," said without hesitation. The next challenge was figuring out how to move the... The creature was far too large to fit in the wandering star. They needed something bigger. Found the solution. There's an old cargo hauler in the next system over. It's used for moving ore from mining stations. If we can rent it, we could modify the cargo hold to safely transport the. How much? He asked. Showed him the number. Winced. It was expensive, very expensive. It would eat up most of their savings and probably put them in debt for the next year. But looking at the numbers on a screen and then thinking about the alone in its cage for 10,000 years made the choice easy. Do it, he said. 3 days later, the cargo hauler arrived. It was massive, easily 50 times the size of the wandering star. The crew worked with the hauler's operators to modify the cargo hold, creating a temporary environment that would keep the safe during the journey to Sanctuary 7. The hardest part was convincing the to leave its prison. The creature had been in the containment facility for so long that it seemed afraid to leave. When they lowered the energy fields, it didn't move. It just stared at the open space before it, uncertain. Floated into the chamber, approaching the creature as he had done many times before. It's okay, he said softly. We're not going to hurt you. We're taking you somewhere better, somewhere you can be free. He reached out and touched the scales. The creature leaned into his touch, making that gentle rumbling sound. Then slowly, carefully, they began to move. It followed out of the chamber that had been its home and prison for. The transfer took hours. It was enormous and had to move carefully through the corridors of the station. But eventually, it made its way to the cargo hauler. The modified hold was waiting, filled with the proper food and equipped with medical monitoring systems. As the settled into its new temporary home, it looked at with its many eyes. There was something in that gaze that made its throat tighten with emotion. Trust. After everything it had been through, the trusted them. We'll get you home, he promised. Just a little longer and you'll be somewhere safe. The journey to Sanctuary 7 took 2 weeks. During that time, the crew cared for the constantly. They fed it, monitored its health, and most importantly, they kept it company. The creature was no longer alone, and it seemed to thrive on the presence of others. Galactic Council observers followed them the entire way, their ships keeping a safe distance but always watching. Could imagine their conversations, their debates about whether the humans were fools or heroes or something in between. On the final day of the journey, made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying the old records of the Empress Throne civilization, digging deeper into their history. What she found made her call to her station immediately. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. Looked at her screen. There were images there, ancient pictures recovered from the Empress Throne archives. They showed the civilization at its height, beautiful cities, advanced technology, and everywhere guardians. Creatures like the, smaller but similar, protecting the people. But it was the last image that made its breath catch. It showed an Empress Throne individual standing beside a young. The person had their hand on the creature's head, and both were looking at each other with obvious affection. They weren't just guardians, said quietly. They were companions, friends. The Empress Throne people raised them from birth, bonded with them. There wasn't a weapon that went wrong. It was a loyal friend who lost everyone it loved and was left alone for 10,000 years. Felt tears in his eyes again. He thought about the waiting all that time, hoping that someone would come back, someone who cared. No one should have to be alone like that, he said softly. No, agreed, they shouldn't. The cargo hauler dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Sanctuary 7 appeared before them. It was a beautiful world, green and blue and alive. The perfect place for a creature that had spent in a metal cage. Prepare for landing, said. Let's bring our friend home. Sanctuary 7 was more beautiful than any picture could capture. The cargo hauler descended through clouds that looked like cotton, passing over forests that stretched to the horizon. Rivers sparkled in the sunlight, and vast plains rolled out like green carpets. This was a world untouched by civilization, kept pure for creatures who needed a home. Stood in the cargo hold with the creature seemed to sense something was happening. Its hundreds of eyes were wide, taking in everything they could see through the hold's windows. When the hauler's engines shifted to landing mode, they made a sound that was almost like a question. "We're here," said, placing his hand on the creature's scales. "This is your new home." The hauler settled onto a wide plain near a forest edge, had scouted the location carefully. There was water nearby, plenty of the native animals that matched the dietary needs and shelter from weather. It was perfect. The cargo hold doors opened slowly, revealing the world outside. Fresh air rushed in, carrying the scent of growing things and wild places. The nostrils flared, taking in these new smells. It had been 10,000 years since the creature had breathed air that wasn't recycled through ancient machines. "Go ahead," said gently. "It's safe, you're free." But the didn't move. It looked at the open door, then back at. The meaning was clear. It didn't want to leave him. Felt his heart break a little. "I know," he said softly. "I don't want to say goodbye either, but you can't live on a ship. You need space. You need freedom. You need to be what you were meant to be." He walked toward the door and the followed. Together they stepped out onto the grass of Sanctuary 7. The ground was soft beneath their feet. The wind was gentle and warm. Above them, the sky was a brilliant blue, with two small moons visible even in daylight. They took a few steps forward, then stopped. It turned its massive head, looking back at with all of its eyes. "It's okay," said, though his voice was thick with emotion. "I'll visit, I promise. This isn't forever goodbye, it's just goodbye for now." And had come out of the hauler as well. They stood together, watching as the slowly explored its new home. The creature moved carefully at first, as if afraid this might all disappear. It sniffed at the grass, tested the ground with its claws, looked up at the open sky with what might have been wonder. Then something amazing happened. A herd of native animals, large creatures with 6 legs and shaggy fur, appeared at the edge of the forest. They were the size of cattle, and according to research, they were perfect prey for The old programming kicked in immediately. The went still, its body low to the ground, its eyes locked on the herd. It was a hunter again, doing what it was bred to do. But this time it wasn't driven by the mad hunger of starvation. This was natural, right? The hunt was over in seconds. The moved with incredible speed and grace, taking down one of the herd animals with a precision that spoke of millions of years of evolution. The rest of the herd scattered, running back into the forest. They would be back. This was the natural order of things. The fed, and for the first time in 10,000 years, it ate real food. Fresh food. Food that satisfied not just its body but some deep instinct that had been for so long. When it was finished, the creature returned to where and his crew waited. It looked different now. More alive. More real. The last traces of the desperate, caged thing it had been were fading away, replaced by what it should have always been, a magnificent predator in its element. "You're going to be okay here," said, reaching up to touch the creature one last time. "This is your home now." The lowered its head, pressing against hand with that same gentle care. Then it made a sound, deep and resonant, that echoed across the plains. It wasn't a roar of aggression. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was something new, a sound of contentment, of peace. As the crew began to board the hauler to leave, suddenly pointed at the sky. "Captain, look." Ships were descending through the clouds. Dozens of them. Ships from every major species in the Galactic Council, plus hundreds of smaller vessels. They had all come to see this moment. His communicator buzzed. It was Ambassador. "Captain, the Council has been watching your progress. What you have done here, it is unprecedented. We all thought that was beyond help, beyond redemption. But you humans saw something we did not. You saw a suffering creature that needed compassion." "We just did what anyone should do," replied. "No," said, and there was something like awe in the alien's translated voice. You did what only humans would do. Every other species in the galaxy saw thee and saw danger, saw a problem to be locked away and forgotten. You saw a living being in pain and decided to help, even at great risk to yourselves. This is why humans are both frustrating and remarkable. Other communications came in. The musical-voiced alien from before said their species was reassessing their own protocols for dangerous creatures. A silicon-based life form admitted they had 3 similar cases of imprisoned beings that might benefit from the same approach. Even species that had been skeptical were asking questions, wanting to learn. Over the next few hours, the plane became crowded with observers. They all kept their distance, respecting the space, but they all wanted to see the impossible thing that had happened here. The monster that wasn't a monster anymore. The weapon that had become a friend. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, knew it was time to leave. They needed time to adjust to its new home, and they needed to give it space. "Goodbye," he said to the creature. "Be well, be happy, you've earned it." They watched as the humans boarded their hauler. It made that gentle sound again, and chose to believe it was the creature's way of saying thank you. As the hauler lifted off, carrying them back to the wandering star, looked out the window. There was still visible below, a dark shape against the green plain. It was watching them go, but it wasn't alone anymore. The world around it was alive with possibility. "Do you think it will be okay?" asked quietly. "Yes," said with certainty, "it's finally home." 3 months later kept his promise. The wandering star returned to Sanctuary 7 for a visit. They landed on the same plane where they had left and the crew stepped out nervously, not sure what they would find. They didn't have to wait long. They appeared at the forest edge, moving with a confidence and grace it had never shown in captivity. It was healthier now, its scales shining, its eyes bright and alert. This was what the creature was meant to be. When it saw, it made a sound of recognition and happiness. It bounded across the plain like an enormous, deadly puppy and pressed its head against his chest with such enthusiasm that it nearly knocked him over. "I missed you too," said, laughing as he tried to stay on his feet while they nuzzled him. "Looks like you're doing well." They spent the day with watching it in its natural environment. The creature showed them its territory, its favorite hunting spots, the cave where it slept. It was thriving in a way that would have been impossible in a cage. As they prepared to leave again, they followed them back to the ship, but this time it didn't look sad. It understood now that they would return, that this wasn't abandonment, this was family visiting. "We'll be back," promised. "Regular visits, I won't let you be alone again." They made a sound that seemed almost like contentment. Then it turned and loped back toward the forest, back to its life of freedom and peace. As the wandering star left Sanctuary 7, pulled up a report on her console. "Captain, you should see this. The story of what we did has spread across the entire galaxy. Other species are starting to reconsider how they treat dangerous or difficult creatures. There's talk of releasing several imprisoned beings to sanctuary worlds. They're calling it the Human Protocol." "The Human Protocol?" asked. "It means trying compassion before giving up," explained. "Trying to help before deciding something is beyond help. Apparently, it's very human." Smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." Plotted their course for the next system, the next adventure. But as they flew away from Sanctuary 7, couldn't help but look back one more time. Somewhere down there, a creature that had been called a monster was living in peace. A beast that had been deemed too dangerous to save was thriving because someone had decided to try anyway. In the end, that was what being human meant. Not giving up on things just because they were difficult. Not leaving things to suffer just because it was easier. Not turning away from pain just because it was scary. Being human meant looking at the impossible and saying, "But what if we try anyway?" And sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible became possible. All it took was a little bit of courage, a lot of compassion, and the stubborn human belief that every living thing deserved a chance at happiness. Somewhere behind them, under an alien sky, that had waited 10,000 years was finally home. And that made every risk, every danger, every moment of doubt worth it. That was the human way. And the galaxy was slowly learning that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't such a bad way to be.